Hello, Packers fans, wherever you may be. This is once again the Pack Attack Cast. Thank you for checking this video out. As always, give us a like and subscribe. We're trying to grow our audience. We're looking to get to 3,000 by the middle of July and hoping to get to 5,000 subscribers by the start of the regular season. Once again, I will be in attendance for the first three training camp practices plus the owners meeting, and I'll be bringing you details on that. So if you're curious about that, please give us a like and subscribe, as it really helps us with those YouTube metrics. Today what we're going to do is we're going to continue our pre-training camp series where we look at each position for the Packers going into training camp, look at the players, look at the coaches that will be coaching them, and also looking at our thoughts on where those positions are going to shake out on the roster. Is it going to be a starter? Is it going to be a depth player on the bench? Is it going to be a practice squad player? We're going to try to figure all of that out before the start of training camp. The farther we get in, the deeper we get into the roster, the harder it will be to tell, because a lot of this will be determined in training camp. For example, I'll give you my thoughts on who a backup versus a starter will be. I'll give you my thoughts on who will be on the practice squad. But a lot of those things, especially for the topic today, the offensive line, are going to be determined in training camp. For the positions we've already covered, which is defensive line and offensive line. If you haven't seen our defensive line video, please go back and check that out after this video. But both of these positions, defensive line and offensive line, they're going through the mechanics and some of the technique in minicamp and OTAs. But until the pads go on in training camp, the defensive line and offensive line, you can't really determine the ability and success of those players on their reps until they're in pads and actually physically competing with their opposition. Another great thing about the Green Bay Packers is we have an above average defensive line and we have an elite offensive line. So when those units are practicing against each other, you're going to have a steel sharpened steel situation where when the ones are against the ones, you're looking at elite position opposition on both sides of the ball. So I just wanted to bring that up really quickly. So that's why training camp really will define the offensive line and defensive line in particular, because until those players really physically go against each other, show what they can do in training camp, it's some of these things are going to be a question mark. And we're going to get into that a little later as we dig into the players and the position battles. But let's start out with the coach for offensive line, which is our primary topic today. Luke Butkus is our offensive line coach. And if you have not seen Luke, go to the Packers website, go to team, go to coaches, and you can see what Luke looks like. Luke, like, if you put in ChatGPT, tell me what a former offensive lineman looks like, Luke Butkus would probably pop up. He's a big, strong, imposing presence. He's got a beard that I wish I could grow, and but he also looks like he's a fun but tough guy, and in my experience, that is the case. So let's talk about Luke Butkus, because one thing a lot of people out there are not really focused on is the position coaches, and I think they are very critical to the defensive line, which again we talked about in the last video, and the offensive line, because you really need to get the most out of those two lines for the Green Bay Packers to have significant success on both sides of the ball. So let's look at Luke Butkus' experience. He joined the Packers in 2019 as an assistant line coach. before being promoted to offensive line coach 3 years ago. So we've talked about continuity and how important it is for the Packers. Luke has been an offensive line coach for the Packers for 3 seasons. He knows the players. He knows what the coaching staff and the GM would like to get out of those players. He knows the schemes. He knows everything involved with this offense that he needs to know as an offensive line coach. That continuity means you're starting from the jump knowing what you need to do as a coach, which is very important. It's his 14th season coaching in the NFL, having previously worked for the Jaguars, the Seahawks, and the Bears. He in his 2 seasons or 3 seasons as offensive line coach. This bio has not been updated for 2024 yet. He's helped the Packers tie for 4th in the NFL over that span in sacks allowed and 5th in sacks allowed per pass play at 5.1%. That has not been updated for 2024, but given the success of the Packers in 2024, which was only more successful in DBOA, and we're going to talk about that later, you're going to see similar stats if you throw in 2024. He guided a line that ranked number 3 in the league last season in sacks allowed. That would be 2023, 30, including just over 10 in the final 9 regular season contests. And you remember, in 2023, the last 9 games for the Green Bay Packers, they were red hot in 2023. And you can see that probably in some significant part factored in with the fact that the offensive line was playing very well. The offensive line impacts your running game, your passing game. It keeps your quarterback healthy. There's nothing more important to the offense than the offensive line, except for possibly the health of your quarterback, as we saw last year with Jordan Love. So let's go deeper into his experience, because I think this is important. He coached the offensive line at his alma mater, University of Illinois, in 2012 and 2016 and 2018. So he's taught on the college level as an offensive line coach and on the pro level, which means he can relate to those players that are coming up from college. He's had experience coaching in the college level and the pro level, and that's very important, especially this year, since we have some new players from the draft for the offensive line. So all these things are really so impressive for him. He was a 3-year starter at center, very important, because the center will call out the line calls. They will help the quarterback get the line ready for the snap of the ball. So the fact that he has experience as a center is really crucial, especially as we'll get into later with some players switching over to the center position this year. He was 3rd-team All-American, 2-team All-Big Ten selection, and captain of the Big Ten championship team in 2001. This is a very experienced coach who's been with this coaching staff for a long time. He knows what they want to get out of their offensive line. He has proven results with the offensive line over the last couple years. We are very lucky to have this guy leading the Green Bay Packers offensive line team. And he can help the offensive line in a multitude of ways, both on and off the field, with his experience both as a coach and a player. So this is really a blessing that we have such a great offensive line coach, and you could see from the results. So let's talk about general thoughts on the offensive line before we go into the players. Last year, they were ranked 4th in offensive-based DBOA, in large part due to this unit. DBOA is an efficiency per play measurement. So the fact that the offense was ranked 4th and how important the offensive line is, that tells you that the offensive line played at a very high level in 2024. And I think they will only get better in 2025 as we've added some very important competition and depth through the draft and free agency. One important thing to note, and this is very important to the Packers' success, the Packers tend to draft tackles that can play inside, giving this unit a unique versatility and depth in the event of injury, even in the game. So if you look at the Green Bay Packers interior linemen, center and guard, but in most of those cases, they are former tackles at college. So they have the size and the experience to play tackle, but they're actually better suited to playing center or guard in the NFL, but they have the versatility that most teams simply do not have. Most teams draft a center to be a center, a guard to be a guard. The Green Bay Packers tend to draft tackles that can play center and guard, and that gives them a lot of size on the offensive line because tackles are generally a little bigger than guards and centers, and also it gives them the depth of players that they can say, hey, we've got a problem at center. We have a great tackle that can probably fill in for a couple games. Same with guard. Same with, let's say we have a problem with a injury at tackle. We've got some players in the interior that have experience playing tackle that we can move out to the tackle position for a game or two if we need to get by. And that is the true strength of the Green Bay Packers offensive line. And it's only been reinforced with the draft this year. One of the things we saw in the Eagles playoff loss is they did not have enough active depth on the roster. And when we lost two players on the offensive line in the game against the Eagles in the playoffs, we didn't have the depth and experience on the bench to come in and fill in those gaps, and it was very disastrous. So I think the addition of the players that we've added in this year's draft is going to alleviate a lot of that concern that, hey, we've got a deep tackle bench. We've got a deep guard bench. We have a deep center bench. And in many cases, those players can interchange as need be. Now, ideally, you would like to give a player a week of practice. So in an ideal situation, let's say you have an injury to a guard. Okay? We have an injury to a guard. He's probably not going to be able to play the next week. So you take somebody either off the bench or you shift positions around, and then you have that player practice for a week at that position, so you can have continuity. But in a pinch, I think this offensive line is going to be a much better situation for situations that we saw in the Eagles game in the playoffs. You have to remember that Eagles game in the playoffs, it was not the defense that lost that game. That defense held strong and gave the Eagles as much as they could get. We're not even going to talk about that first fumble that shouldn't have been a fumble at the start of the game that kind of changed the dynamic and the competitive balance of the game. But the truth of the matter is the offensive line was what cost us that game. There's no question about it, because we couldn't do anything in the run game consistently, and we couldn't do anything in the pass game once we lost some players in the offensive line in that game. So if you're looking for a culprit for that playoff loss, it was 100% the depth of the offensive line, not the individual players that got hurt, because that's just going to happen in a football game. It was the depth in the offensive line that really caused that the failure in that playoff game, because the Packers were really into it in the fourth quarter. And I still believe if we hadn't had injuries, if we hadn't had the turnover in the first play of the game, and we hadn't had injuries in the offensive line, I think that game could have gone down to the bell, because those teams were really closely matched. So let's take a look at the players we have on this offensive line. Again, this is an elite group last year when there wasn't injuries, and I think they will be even better this year. We're going to talk about that as we go through each player. So let's start out with Elgton Jenkins. Elgton Jenkins is moving from guard to center, and that is the plan right now. Jenkins is currently on hold in. He's still in the building while they're working on a contract adjustment. I do expect his contract issue to be resolved before the start of training camp because it's very important that the Green Bay Packers build continuity for all of training camp. So it's very important that we see Elgton Jenkins under center at the start of training camp because a lot of the plans for this offensive line center around Elgton Jenkins being in there at center. Now, in training camp, mini camp and OTAs, we saw a lot of people playing center, but I do think that when training camp starts, it's either going to be Elgton Jenkins if they resolve his contract issues, or they're going to go to the next guy on my list in the event that he is not in practice. But let's talk some more about Elgton Jenkins first. Elgton is an elite pass rusher at guard, pass protector at guard, and an average run blocker. So I expect we're going to see the same thing when he is in the center role. I think we're going to see an above average pass protector and an average run blocker. Now, the center's position doesn't start when the ball is snapped. It starts in between the plays. Most good centers will actually watch which players the opponents sub in between the games, and they will keep track of this, and they will focus on that more than the play that is being called in the huddle. Not that they won't know what the play is, especially if it's a run play running towards one of the A gaps, which is the center's primary responsibility. But more importantly, the center will look at who is coming in from the other team and figure out how that's going to impact play, because what the center needs to do before they snap the ball is they're going to help the quarterback. It's kind of like a tandem situation. The quarterback and the center will work together but separately to call out the protections. If you really watch game tape on this, it's a work of art. So sometimes the center will call certain things out, and sometimes the quarterback in the same play will call things out. And those two players need to look at the opposition in concert to really help the offensive line get ready for the next play. So that is why the center is so important. Now, Elgton is a very experienced player with 8 years of experience starting this year at guard, and he played center in college, so he should be able to fall into this role very quickly. We did see Elgton play center last year against the Lions, but it was with very limited practice ahead of time, and he was clearly rusty. But I think by the start of game 1, he's going to be in his zone as a center. Next up at center, we have Jacob Monk. He is in his sophomore year. He has a lot of size going for him at 308 as last posted. I would like to see him get into the 110, 115 range if he's going to play significant time at center. We did not see Monk on the field in 2024, and now looking at mini camps and OTAs, I'm starting to understand why, because he seems to be a center of the future. Monk has a relative athletic score of over 9 as a center, and the Packers right now, based on how they're using him in OTAs and minicamp, see him as a center, which is why we didn't see him on the field last year. He can play guard in a pinch, but he doesn't have the lateral quickness to play tackle. So this guy is definitely going to be a center for the Green Bay Packers. Whether that's in 2026 or 2027, I don't know, but he really measures up in all measurable ways as a center. Now, In the event that Elton Jenkins can't play, and maybe there's an injury the next game for Jacob Monk, the next player I would expect to fill in at center is Sean Ryan, who is your starting right guard. So they would have to shuffle the line around. But Sean Ryan was playing some snaps as center in OTAs and minicamp. So I think he slips into the role of being a backup center in the event of a catastrophic issue with the center position. All right, and that is all the players that I expect to see playing center in 2025, unless something seriously happened. You have Elton Jenkins as your starting center. You have Jacob Monk as a backup center / guard. And in the event of a true emergency, Sean Ryan would be your emergency center. Again, that would most likely happen if Elton Jenkins was out and maybe Monk got hurt during a game and could not come back in. Then Sean Ryan would probably move to center. That would definitely be a backup situation. Now, it is important to note that if Jacob Monk comes in, he doesn't have as much experience at center, or Sean Ryan comes in as an emergency center, a lot of the offensive line calls are probably going to fall onto Jordan Love. So that will be one more thing Jordan Love will have to do if Monk or Sean Ryan are in at center, because they don't have as much experience. Now keep in mind, the quarterback does have the radio to the sideline until there's 10 seconds left on the clock. So it's very possible that in that situation where Monk or Sean Ryan are playing center, Jordan Love is going to get that thoughts on what's going on with the opposition from the offensive coaching staff. So, for example, let's say a designated pass rusher comes into the play for the opposition. Someone on the sideline might call into Jordan Love and say, "Hey, Jordan, there's a designated pass rusher coming into the game. Please be aware of that, because that's a player that more likely than not is going to be rushing the passer, and they'll need to adjust for that." So just some insights on what could happen with the offensive line there in the event that Eldon Jenkins or Jacob Monk is not in the starting lineup. Now let's go to guards. I'm very excited about this guard group. This guard group is really going to help improve the run game in 2025. And you're going to say, wait, the Packers were already a great run team in 2024. I think the Packers are going to be more efficient as a running team in 2025 than they were in 2024. They might end up with the same number of rushing yards, or maybe even slightly less with a healthy Jordan Love, but I think their efficiency is going to really improve this year. And efficiency at running back is so important, because whether you get 3 yards, 4 yards, or 5 yards on first and second down really impacts the efficiency of the whole offense. So I think this group is really going to improve in 2025 with the free agent addition of Aaron Banks as your left guard. Aaron Banks came over from the 49ers. He's a free agent addition, and he takes the place of Eldon Jenkins at left guard. Banks is a much better run blocker than Jenkins, and probably slightly worse as a pass protector. So overall, I feel this is an upgrade due to the potential of a more explosive plays in the running game with his ability to block and move on rushing plays. If you look at the tape for Aaron Banks, you can look at 2024 or even better 2023, where I think he was healthy and 100%. Aaron Banks is a great move guard. What that means is he is able to move on running plays and get to the second level of the defense. So what that means is, instead of the running back getting tangled up with the defensive line or even the linebackers, Aaron Banks can pop big plays by blocking the second layer of the defense, which is normally linebackers, and allow the running back to get into the secondary before he's being tackled. That is a significant upgrade to this offensive line. So we're taking Elgton Jenkins, putting him at center. He is an upgrade over the current center. Aaron Banks is an equal player, in my opinion, overall at guard to Elgton Jenkins. So we have an upgraded center and an equal playing field at guard. That is a significant improvement, especially when Aaron Banks can get out there and block in the rushing game, which is really his strength. Let's go on to Sean Rhyan. He's going to be your starter at right guard, most likely, barring an injury or something unexpected in training camp. Sean Rhyan had his best year as a pro in 2024. He is solid in the run and above average as a pass blocker. He looks entrenched at the position, but he is a free agent in 2026, and he's playing for his next contract, whether it's Green Bay or elsewhere, in 2026. He also has the ability to play center in an emergency, which we already talked about. So Sean Rhyan, reportedly from multiple sources, has come into training camp in great shape, and he is ready to ball out for his new contract, either with the Packers or with someone else. So I think Sean Rhyan is only going to be better in 2025 than he was in 2024. And I think he's definitely a strength of this offense, especially as a pass blocker. So very excited to see what Sean Rhyan can do at right guard in 2025. Next up, and probably the first player off the bench, is Donovan Jennings. Donovan Jennings was drafted last year. He did not play in 2024, but if you look at how he was used in OTA and mini camps, he was the first guard off the bench, and he played with the first team offense in minicamp and OTA because Banks was not practicing due to a minor injury. So right now it looks like Donovan Jennings is the first off the bench at guard. We'll see how that develops in training camp as we have a full allotment of offensive linemen to see where he shakes out. But right now it looks like Donovan Jennings is our swing guard in the event of a serious injury. So if Aaron Banks is out, Donovan Jennings would come in. If Sean Rhyan is out, there's a possibility that Donovan Jennings might slide over to right guard. So we'll have to see what happens. Right now, he is practicing as a left guard. Now, keep in mind, generally speaking, the left guard is a more valuable position than the right guard, just because of running plays and how the defense tends to push more on the left side of the ball than the right side of the ball on average. So this is a very important development. We're going to have to see how that shakes out during training camp. Next up at guard, he was a tackle in college, but currently he is listed as a guard for the Green Bay Packers, is John Williams. He was drafted in the 7th round, but we have not seen him in training camp or OTAs, and I'm not sure why. He was not seen with the rehab group. He was not seen in practice at all. So I don't know what's going on with John Williams, but he's really hurting his chances of making the team right now by not being on the practice field. Hopefully whatever is keeping John Williams out of practice will be fixed before the start of training camp as he tries to get a position on this roster. Last up, and I don't think this is going to be material, is we have Tyler Cooper, who is an unrestricted free agent. In my opinion, he's looking for an opportunity on the practice squad, given the depth of players above him, both at guard and tackle. Because keep in mind, and we'll talk about this a little later, since the Packers like to take tackles and put them in at guard, you might see a situation where a backup tackle in an emergency becomes a starting guard. That's just the way the Packers run their offensive lines. So with that note, let's get to tackles here. We have Zach Tom as our starting right tackle. Zach Tom is an elite right tackle both in the run and the pass and is a game changer in both phases. He is a lock to start at right tackle, and I expect the team to extend his deal before the start of the season. In my opinion, Zach Tom is the heart of the offensive line, and he makes the players around him better. He is a true, what I would call a silent leader on the offensive line. He's not a outspoken rah-rah guy, but he leads by example on this offensive line. Next up at left tackle, we have Rasheed Walker, who was our starter last year. Walker is an elite pass blocker and an average run blocker at left tackle. Walker is a free agent in 2026, and it is expected he will not return, so he will fight for his job with Jordan Morgan in training camp. And we're going to talk about Jordan Morgan a little better. So Rasheed Walker, Jordan Morgan, this is going to be a classic training camp battle to the start of training camp. The winner will start, and the loser will be the first tackle off the bench. Let's talk about Jordan Morgan. Jordan Morgan was drafted at tackle but saw limited action as guard and was average last year. He was drafted in the first round in 2024 as a tackle. He had a lot of injury issues, so he has an incomplete grade so far. He will be given a chance to win the starting left tackle in camp, but if he doesn't win the job, he will be the first player off the bench at guard and possibly tackle. So let's talk about this, okay? Jordan Morgan wins the job at left tackle. He's going to be the left tackle in training camp. If he loses the job to Rasheed Walker in training camp, he's going to be the first tackle on the bench, but he also has guard experience. So it's very likely if there's a serious injury at guard, either with Banks or Sean Ryan, Jordan Morgan will come off the bench and play guard. So that's one of the strengths of this offensive line, is the fact that we have tackles that can slide in and play guard without much of a hiccup. There are some teams that don't even have two good tackles on their team. We have two tackles that can start, and we have depth at offensive tackle in Jordan Morgan and Anthony Belton, which we're going to talk about next. Anthony Belton is a 2025 second-round pick, and he's been exclusively at tackle so far and many in OTAs. I feel like they are looking for him to focus at the position in 2025 and get all his reps in at tackle. Barring an injury, I think he's a starter somewhere on the line in 2026, as we have offensive linemen leave as free agents in 2026. So Anthony Belton is mainly focusing on tackle, but I think in an emergency, he could slide in and be a starter at guard. So again, that's that depth that we have. We have four offensive linemen that in many teams would start at tackle. I believe on many teams, Zach Tom would be their best offensive lineman. Rasheed Walker would be the best offensive lineman on most teams. Jordan Morgan would be a starting player at tackle for most of the teams in the NFL. Anthony Belton is a quality player that can play offensive tackle for most teams. So that's the depth that this team has at tackle. Last up, we have Kadeem Telfort. He was an average guard in limited snaps, but he was awful when thrown into the playoff game against the Eagles. Now, keep in mind with Telfort, he has limited experience at guard where he was thrown in, since he's naturally a tackle, and he had very little practice time before he was thrown into the playoff game against the Eagles. So try to give Kadeem Telfort the benefit of the doubt. He might be a better player than what we saw in the playoff game. There's a lot of teams that look bad against, a lot of players who look bad against the Eagles. So let's give Telfort the benefit of the doubt. I think he will be playing most likely he will be trying to get a role in the practice squad for 2025. Now that we've gone through all of the players, I think I've really highlighted the fact that how these players can mix and match on the offensive line because of the quality depth that the Packers have. We have tackles that can move to guard. We have guards that can possibly play tackle for a couple of games if need be. And we have multiple players who can play center. So the Green Bay Packers have done an excellent job of building, in my opinion, I'm a biased Packer fan, but in my opinion, overall, I think this offensive line is the best offensive line in football. Some people would say it was the Lions last year, but I don't think that's going to be the case this year. So I think the Green Bay Packers can be the best offensive line in 2025. Now, what are we going to do as far as positions on the active roster for the offensive line? I feel that in center, there will be 2 active roster spots on game day. We have Jenkins and Monk. Now, Monk can also provide depth at guard. So just don't think of him as like, oh, why are the Packers going to have 2 centers on game day? I think they're going to have Monk active on game day because it's so important to have that center solid on the offensive line, and he can provide depth at guard at need be on game day. At guard, I think we're going to have 3 players on the active roster on game days. Right now, it's going to be Banks, Ryan, and Jennings, as long as Jennings doesn't lose that 3rd guard position right now. The team can get away with being light on the active roster with guard, given the number of tackles that could fill in at guard in a pinch. We've talked about that already. So for game day, I think we're going to have 4 tackles active on game day. We're going to have Zach Tom, Rasheed Walker, Jordan Morgan, and we're going to have Anthony Belton as our 4 starting tackles on game day, knowing that Jordan Morgan can step in and play guard as need be. Belton can go in and play guard as need be. So the depth of this team is going to allow us to maybe go a little short on guard for a game, but knowing that we have tackles that could come in and play guard as need be. On the practice squad, I think we're going to have 1 or 2 players of Williams, Telfort, or possibly a player that's on another team's roster right now. It's not unusual for the Green Bay Packers to look at cuts on other teams and take those offensive linemen and put them onto the practice squad for the Green Bay Packers. So that wraps up this edition of the Pack Attack Cast. If you enjoyed this, you found it valuable, please give us a like and subscribe. We're trying to grow our numbers for 2025. We would like to get to 5,000 subscribers by the start of the season, and you can help make that happen. If you're not sure if you want to give us a subscribe, give us a like and come back and watch another video. We're going to be back later on next week as we continue to look at each position before the start of training camp. And as always, go Pack Go.